My long-awaited book, Astrology Realized, is finally available and waiting for you at Amazon and other online retailers. Get one for you, your loved one, or as a gift. All part of your fabulous journey to understanding astrology. Enjoy. Hello, fabulous friends and fans. I am your host, Nadia Shah. And welcome to Synchronicity, and this is your moment of synchronicity. I'm so excited. Michael Lutin is back. Michael, hello.
Hello, I'm really thrilled to be back. I always have fun with you.
I'm so glad, Michael. I know that we always have some very thought-provoking conversations.
Definitely we do, and I'm sure it's going to get even more thought-provoking.
And so I was thinking, what can I possibly ask you? Because last time we had such a great conversation. You covered so much. A lot of people out there know you through your incredible, unique voice, including writing horoscopes for Vanity Fair. So tell me about writing horoscopes. What's that like for you? What's the inspiration? What's the intention behind all that?
That's a great question, because when I first started, I remember when I first started at Vanity Fair, and I left, it's been 5 or 6 years since I've left Vanity Fair, but when I first started there, I was writing very serious kind of messages to people. It was really good astrology, and it was very serious communications. And then one night at 11 o'clock at night, my editor called me and he said, "Honey, why don't you just write like you talk and just make us laugh the way you do at parties?" And then I realized that I hadn't really been talking to the people. I'd been writing to them. It changed all my writing forever. And I think that since then, I've been able to communicate with people in a way that everybody can understand.
And a lot of your writing is very politically motivated. We were talking a little bit about that when the camera was off. So tell me about that. Like you like commenting on world events, and obviously you are interested in politics as well.
I am. And when I first started writing for Vanity Fair, I used to do one sign a month. And then I would have a confidential letter to some political figure. I remember writing to Queen Elizabeth, saying, you know, "You're the Royal Highness to a lot of people. To me, you're just another overweight Taurus who's really trying to cut down on sugar." And I once wrote to the Premier of Russia saying, "No more summit meetings during a retrograde Mercury." So I've had a lot of fun with it. And I've even had phone calls from the government, from people in the government, because the things I say are thought-provoking, but also you can't, as astrologers, we can't become too wrapped up in it, because we all know it's a flow of social evolution. So I remember writing to Ahmadinejad this year and said to him, "The next time you come to the United Nations, don't come Jewish during the Jewish holidays, because you can't get a good corned beef sandwich then." And I meant it sort of, because the whole thing is ridiculous, and everybody eventually has to have their grandchildren belong to the other group. So I don't take it that seriously, and yet I'm really very seriously interested in what's happening in the world.
You just said astrologers, we have to flow with it because it's social evolution. So what did you mean by that? That astrologers, we have to flow with it? We have to take it not as serious? What do you mean?
Well, it is serious. I mean, we could, all kill each other and kill ourselves, but I think that as astrologers, we have to have perspective. We have to be able to step back a little bit and realize that you can't say that you're conservative or you're liberal, even if you have these views, because the whole thing is a puppet show. It's an illusion from the first place. And while there are major political problems and ideological questions that have to be solved, as astrologers, we have to, I believe, always be able to step back from it and realize that hundreds of years from now, this will not even mean anything. And that makes it sound like I don't really care what happens, because I do. But I just don't think our job as astrologers is to become too enmeshed in the politics the way the people involved in them are.
Do you think that astrologers can, at times, their own, I guess, leanings influence their interpretations, especially where it comes to world events?
Always. Are you kidding me? I try not to, but I'm sure it leaks through. You can't hide yourself. If you're going to be an authentic communicator, you can't hide yourself. It's a balance we have to get. We have to achieve this balance between being authentic and staying apart from this fray. I don't know how to do it. Sometimes I don't, but I think that's as individuals who are listened to by the public, I think we have to be as dispassionate as we can, because is there one side that's more right than the other? There is not. There is not. Everybody's got a story, and everybody's got at least 10 stories. And it's this, I do the same thing when I write about the Middle East. I actually got, I wrote a piece on Israel and Palestine, and I said, you two should get together and call your country Izzy-stein. And I got a lot of very, very angry letters from it. So I was kidding, but then again, I wasn't. You know, I think that, and I also wrote a piece that was, I think it was in Huffington Post. I said, you should start busing from Israel to Palestine and Palestine to Israel. All your kids should be going to each other's schools, because when they fall in love with the other side and your grandchildren belong to the other group, what are you going to do? And I got mixed mail on that one.
I love diversity. I completely agree with you. Like, wherever there is a conflict based on these superficial things, it's great to see people coming together, especially personally, because friendship resolves so much.
It's in the end, it's what happens. I was hearing on the news the other day, they were saying that Japan is America's strongest ally in Asia. And I thought, if someone from 1942 could tune into a radio show in the future, it would sound like crazy science fiction, because these relationships are constantly changing, as they always will. It'll happen when the aliens land. It always happens between groups. You know what was amazing? I hope I can tell this quickly. A study was done of babies and puppets. And one puppet had Cheerios, and it looked like the puppet liked the Cheerios, but it didn't like the cornflakes. And the other puppet liked the cornflakes, but didn't like the Cheerios. Then they fed the babies Cheerios and cornflakes, and some babies liked cornflakes and some babies liked Cheerios. And then they asked the babies, and they were 9-month-old babies, they handed them the puppets, and almost, I think more than 80% of the babies chose the puppets that liked the things they liked and didn't like the puppet that didn't like the things that they liked. And they even went so far as wanting to see the ones that didn't like what they liked to be punished. So these ingrained prejudices were already there. And then it showed these tests were done as children got older, and as they became more cognizant, they became more sharing and understanding. But in the beginning, they were very selfish and, in a way, clannish. It's a fascinating study in terms of what lies inside people, in terms of their prejudices.
So going back a little bit, I do agree with you. You can't have astrology without the astrologer. So you can't have astrology unless you have someone there interpreting it, and whoever's interpreting it is bringing themselves to that moment of interpretation. Do you think that we as astrologers have any ethical responsibilities, and what would they be?
Wow. Why don't you ask me something easy? Of course we do.
How to resolve the Middle East conflict?
Of course.
Well, you already said that.
I showed you how to do that. No, you know what I think happens? That no matter what you say, that you're not a therapist, when you are going inside people's heads, you're operating on their brains. So you have to have training, you have to know how to deal with people, you have to know when to proceed, when to pull back, when to shut up, when to say nothing, to allow people their time to digest the material. So it's not only an ethical responsibility, which of course it is, but it's a human responsibility to learn exactly how powerful it is to communicate with people about a language that they don't really understand. So, of course, you have to do that. That's why I tried to get as much training as I could in one era of dealing with people, and then as much astrology as I could learn. I think that for the most part, we have a very ethical community. I would say almost everybody I know in our community, although I may not agree with their astrology or their methods, I think everybody here in our community has a really good heart. And listen, if we didn't have a desire to help people, what the hell would we be doing in astrology? What, for the fortune that we're making? So of course I think that's true.
And what about with delivering horoscopes, like on a more mass scale, whether it's writing or otherwise, specifically like sun sign, rising sign horoscopes? What do you think the responsibilities are there?
Well, very early on, I saw the power of the solar horoscope or the sun sign chart. If I didn't see it, I would have never written sun sign columns. But I know that in my practice, I see that clients think of their sun sign. They think their sun's chart. So I think it's a very valid, although not completely profound way to describe someone's chart. But for novices, for people who have an interest in it, and I've been doing it for years. For years I've been doing it, and I do it in my practice. I don't do it just in the magazines or TV. I do it in the practice because I think it has profound validity.
Okay, now a little bit more inside the brain and practice of Michael Lutin. I wondered, can you share with us maybe like one technique that you really like one way in which you approach the chart or one specific technique you use that seems to work for you quite a bit?
Wow. Well, I don't want to get too technical, so it's very difficult. But what I will do when preparing a chart.
Yeah, you can be technical because a lot of the people who watch are students of astrology or just new to wanting to learn more about it. So as technical as feels right to you.
Okay, so I'll just list a few things I find valuable. Angularity, what's an angle, elevation. Planetary disposition is almost the whole reading because if you have a complicated disposition, you have a complicated disposition. If you have a final dispositor, that's the bottom line of the horoscope. So I will study the chart until I think that I can get in the window. I'm sort of like a burglar. And when I find an open window, I get excited and I stop. And I let it unfold during the reading. So I don't spoil the surprise for myself or the client. So I used to spend,
Okay, so now Michael Lutin is going to cough and something brilliant is going to come forward now.
For my cough. I used to spend days and days and days and days and weeks to do one chart. And then when the poor person came, I would give those 7-hour readings. And then the poor lady would say, but my kids got out of school at 3 o'clock. And I'd say, now, wait a minute. I haven't told you what flower rules Libra, and we're only on your 6th house. Now I have learned that people in a first session only need to hear a specific piece of information. They don't need to know what flag flies over Cancer or Taurus. They came for a reason that they often don't say in the surface. And then during the session, when I feel the lotus open, I know I earned my money. And if the lotus doesn't open in the session, I don't even charge the people. When I know I earned my money, that thing happened. And if there's only one piece of information, it happened. So you don't have to tell everything in a session. When a person calls back, if it's 1 year, 6 months, 5 years, it's not that they really want their progressions. They want to continue the conversation that you had the first time. That is a secret, esoteric little tidbit that happens to work. That's what they want. If they called you back, something happened of value.
So what do you do to help that lotus along, to help that lotus open? Because I imagine now, the more you practice, the better you get at anything, but especially with astrology. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what's ahead for my path. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. I'm sure you feel that way as well. What's ahead for you? I'm sure now you can say that the lotus opens a lot easier or a lot more frequently than it would have, say, 40 years ago. Would you agree with that? And how do you help that process along?
Before I was born 40 years ago?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, 29 years ago as you were welcomed into this body.
I don't know if it's easier. I think I have better tools of communicating and listening to whether what I'm saying makes sense and whether I'm hearing the right things. So I think learning to listen and to craft my method of delivery has maybe helped. But again, I think far and wide, more people are more open to it today than they were years ago. I think that's true too. I think people are largely more sophisticated about this philosophy and this approach to life.
And why do you think that is? Like, is it filling some sort of need? Is it that people now have greater permission? They can come out of the astrology closet? Like, what do you think it is? And are there specific aspects that you can point to?
All of those. I think all of those. But when we look at the collapse of the patriarchy, the rise of women, the decrepit religious institutions that have become irrelevant in the modern society. Not that religion needs to cater to whims and fads, but the Judeo-Christian heritage is eroding because we're at the end of the Piscean age. Not that astrology is going to become the new religion, God forbid, but people are more open to different approaches to consciousness now. Certainly, they have more resistance to orthodoxy. I would certainly think so. And in fact, I noticed also in the West here. I noticed many people are not naming their babies with biblical names anymore. Not just ethnics or minorities, but I find it a lot. Babies are called, Foster and Macaulay and Shaniqua, and so the biblical names are falling away as a sign that the traditional Judeo-Christian heritage, except for the really strong Orthodox on both sides, it's being eroded by a more global culture and cosmic culture, and I think that's the reason, and that's why people are more open. You talk to a young person today, a kid in school, and say, "Do you think that there's life on other planets?" They'll say to you, "Oh, they know there is. There was microscopic life found on Mars." There's no doubt that the expanse of consciousness extends far beyond our globe now, and that means that the religious orthodoxies have to quickly scribble something in their margins because it doesn't work anymore.
So this is a few times now that you've mentioned aliens. I think this is the second or third time just in this conversation. So tell me about that. When will we know that we are not alone? Like, undoubtedly, no.
Well, according to the Frank Drake equation, there's an amazing, and you should look this up if you don't know it. I think it's the Frank Drake equation. Based on the known number of planets in our galaxy alone that has intelligent life, which is one, of course, right? If you take that number one and you statistically multiply it by the number of planets in the solar system, and the number of solar systems in our galaxy, the number of solar systems that have planets around them, the number of solar systems that have possible life planets are going around them, the number of planets where intelligent life has evolved, the number of planets where a technical civilization has survived on those planets. You have between 60,000 and 1 million technical civilizations in our galaxy alone now, based only on the fact that we have one. So if you still think we're alone, what can I tell you?
When do you think, astrologically speaking, they will announce themselves to us?
Stephen Hawking, one of the greatest minds of our time, is very much against SETI. He says, and quite rightly so, that in the history of civilization, anytime there has been a superior civilization contacting an inferior civilization, like just look at the history, the inferior civilization disappeared. He says we shouldn't be looking for trouble. But Carl Sagan, on the other hand, said keep looking, keep looking, keep looking. And as you watch people, whether this is planned or whether it's natural evolution, more and more people realize it's absurd to think that life only evolved here, an intelligent life. So when do I think it's going to happen? A lot of people think it happened a long time ago. You know, sometimes you watch these TV shows about ancient aliens. Some of it's far-fetched, and some of you think, well, how did they do that? How would that possibly happen? You know, and so you don't get regular news anymore. There is no news on most primetime television because it's created around getting sponsors and advertising and ratings. So you have to watch. I watch a lot of foreign news. I watch French television. I watch some of the few better American TV and British TV. I watch Al Jazeera a lot because one good thing about Al Jazeera, they're not as people used to think that they were so one-sided. They're really not. On some things they are. You see how ridiculously clear their bias is, but mostly they're not. Mostly Al Jazeera tells you what's happening in this country, what's happening in that country, what's happening in this country, which we never get anywhere. In New York, we don't even hear any weather outside New York City. So I like to watch what's going on in the world. Al Jazeera is not there's no humor, there's no lightness. It gets very tedious. But why did I tell you that? Oh, about the aliens. There are some very great alternate news channels that talk not just about aliens, but about what's happening in the world. I was watching when I went to Bali in 2011. I was in Bali working, and that's when Fukushima happened. And there was an alternate news channel. I won't say his name right now because he made a fool of himself on Piers Morgan very badly. But he knew, don't ask me how, he knew what was really happening on Fukushima. He knew how bad that explosion was going to be. He knew how long the radiation would be going on. That was like 2 days or 1 day after it, when everybody in the world on the regular news channel was saying, oh, silly, it was just a little thing. And he knew. So there are many alternate news channels that provide information, sometimes not always documented. And I guess you asked me that about the aliens. So you have to be able to filter it out, and you have to realize that, of course, this is happening. I personally am not that interested in them coming down here and taking over and eating my face off or anything like that, you know?
Yes. What is it? The cookbook to feed?
Man, right.
The Twilight Zone we're going to live in.
Do you know that there are 100,000 people who already signed up? Do you know about this? They are offering a one-way trip to Mars for 2026. Neptune will be in Aries. It's a one-way trip, and I guess they're interviewing mostly couples. I would assume they are. And I guess everything is going to be everything paid for. It's going to take 8 years to train them because they believe they're going to send colonists to Mars, which means in 50 or 100 years, if this works, we will be creating horoscopes that are Mars-centered, babies being born on Mars. There's so much happening we can't even possibly imagine.
God, it's so exciting to think about what's ahead. Michael, thank you so much. I want to thank you so much just for having the courage to trust your voice and being an amazing example of that, not just in the world to your fans. And as I told you, a lot of your fans, they come to me and say, hey, do you know about Michael Lutin? But also just to astrologers, that you honor your unique voice. You're making this amazing contribution, and it'll be great to see how you continue and how the whole community continues to strengthen as a result.
Thank you. And if I've said too much and I disappear, contact Nadia and let her help find me.
I will know where Michael Lutin is, probably somewhere in Paris, no doubt. Thank you so much for being here to celebrate Michael Lutin with me. Until we connect again, take care.